everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'll show you how to make an infinity dress to fit any doll. This is really easy to make and can be worn dozens of ways, so it's a great addition to any doll's wardrobe. You'll want to start by taking a few measurements. Around the doll's waist, the length from the waist to wherever you want the skirt to end, the doll's full height, and from the middle of the doll's side over the fullest part of the bust, to the center of their chest. You can work in inches or centimeters, whatever is easiest for you. You'll want to take your measurements without clothes on your doll, of course. I've already taken mine. The first step is making the skirt. You'll need one calculation for this. Divide the waist measurement by 6.28 and make a note of the number. If you've watched my tutorial on making a circle skirt, this is the same deal. From my 14 centimeter waist measurement, this gives me 2.23. To make this dress, you'll need stretchy knit fabric. I'm using a lightweight white jersey knit. We'll cut the skirt on a fold. Fold your fabric in half, and then fold that in half to make a square that's 4 layers thick. This will let us cut out the whole skirt at once. The corner where all 4 layers join will be the center of the skirt. Get your fabric as smooth as you can. I like to pin the layers together to hold them even. I turn my fabric so I can work with it a little easier. We'll start in the corner that creates the center of the circle skirt. From the corner, measure down and mark the calculation you got by dividing your waist measurement. For me, this is 2.23. It can be difficult to draw on stretchy fabric, so it may work better for you to make dots like this and join them into a circle freehand, like I do. This doesn't need to be perfect. Next, we'll measure down to the length you want the skirt to be. I want a floor-length skirt, which was about 12 inches on my doll. When you mark this measurement, make sure you're measuring down from the waist mark, not from the corner of the fabric, or your skirt might end up too short. I put my pencil at the 12-inch mark, then keep the pencil in place and slide the measuring tape to the corner of the fabric. That way I know my skirt is the right length. From there, I can hold the measuring tape at the corner of the fabric and then swing the pencil around, holding it at the same measurement to create a guideline for my circle. I do a dashed line, then lightly join it freehand. Before we cut our fabric though, there's one last adjustment we need to make. We have to add a seam allowance to the waistline, or the skirt will be too big after it's sewn. I'll move this line closer to the corner by about 1/4 of an inch, since that's the seam allowance I usually use for dolls. The new line is where we'll cut, and the original line will be where we sew our pieces together. I pin my fabric to hold it steady, then cut out the skirt. There are 2 more pieces we need to create this dress. We'll need the 2 straps and a waistband. The strap's length should be 1.5 times the full height of your doll. Sophie is 18 inches tall. Her height times 1.5 is 27 inches. The strap width should be the measurement from your doll's side to the middle of their chest. For me, this is 2 inches. The straps are just 2 long rectangles. I'll make one adjustment to mine, but I'll explain that when I mark them. For the waistband, we'll create a smaller rectangle. The width of the waistband should be your original waist measurement, plus 1/2 inch for a seam allowance. The height is just however tall you want your waistband to be, but with the seam allowance added and then doubled so that we can fold it in half. So if I want a waistband that's about 3/4 of an inch tall, I'll need to add 1/4 inch for the seam allowance, which gives me 1 inch, and then double that for the full waistband width. So my waistband piece will be 2 inches tall. I use a rotary cutter and a self-healing mat to make sure my waistband piece is nice and square, but you could also make a paper pattern piece if you're worried about accuracy. When I go to cut the straps, 27 inches is longer than my cutting mat, so I'll cut on a folded piece of fabric. If I were using a thicker jersey fabric, I wouldn't need to do anything to finish the edges of the straps. But this lightweight stuff is prone to tearing or raveling, so I'm actually going to double the width of my straps, from 2 inches to 4 inches, plus a seam allowance, so I can sew them into closed straps that don't have any raw edges. This way I can be sure they won't ravel or tear. This is a lot bulkier, especially on a small doll, but the dress will last a lot longer, so that's the sacrifice I'm willing to make. I double check my measurements before I cut, then I cut 2 straps. Now we have all the pieces we need. If you're not familiar with knit fabrics like jersey, you may not know that it has a right side and a wrong side. The wrong side shows a horizontal pattern to the knit, like this, and the right side has visible vertical ribbing. It may be hard to see in this video, so here's a close-up. The horizontal pattern of the wrong side, and the vertical ribbing of the right side. The ribbing on the right side tends to look like a lot of little V-shapes all stacked up in rows. If you're making straps like mine, you'll want to fold it with wrong side out, right sides together to sew the top and side of the strap closed. If not, you don't have to worry about this part. Before you start sewing, make sure you're using the right kind of needle for stretchy fabric. A universal needle can work, but you might get better results using a stretch needle, especially if your stretchy fabric contains spandex. If you are making straps like mine, go ahead and sew the top and the side closed with a normal straight stitch. Clip the top corners of the seam allowance, then turn the strap right side out. Make sure you turn the corners well too. Sew both straps this way. Now we'll attach the straps to the skirt. Put the open end of the strap, or whichever end if yours doesn't need finished, against the edge of the waist hole. The straps should be right up against each other or slightly overlapping. You may want to baste these pieces on now, adding a temporary line of hand stitching to hold them in place. I'll just pin them for now, because I've done this a few times before. I'll regret it later. Next, prepare the waistband by folding it with right sides together and sewing the end closed. Fold the seam open, and then fold the waistband in half. Now we'll slide this ring onto the right side of the skirt fabric, around the waist hole. You want the straps to be sandwiched in between the skirt and the waistband. The raw edges will all be lined up together. Once it's in place, it's time to sew. Using a zigzag stitch to maximize the amount of stretch your skirt has, you'll want to run 2 lines of stitches. One along the edges to hold them all together, and one a bit higher so that the entire stitch is on the fabric instead of sealing the edge. It doesn't matter what order you do this in, but I like to seal the edges first and then run my main seam line, just because it's easier for me. This can be tricky with really small dolls, so take your time. Clip your threads and the dress is basically done. Remember when I said I'd regret not basting it? Yep, my straps slid while I was sewing, and now there's a big gap in between them. On a larger doll this probably wouldn't matter, but this is too far apart for Sophie. I'll pick the seam out and fix it. Even though you don't have to do anything else, you might want to finish the bottom edge of your skirt. My favorite way to do this is with a lettuce edge. To do this, set your machine to a zigzag stitch and then drop your stitch length down really short, like 1 or less. It's hard to see where mine is, but it's right about a 0.5, which is the tiny stitches used for making buttonholes. Then put the edge of your skirt under the presser foot and stretch the fabric as you sew. The tiny stitches create the appearance of an edge wrapped in thread, which means this can be really pretty if you use a bright color of thread. As you stretch and sew, the edge will start to ruffle up, like the edges of leaves of lettuce. The only problem is this takes a really long time to do. Here I'm sewing at actual speed. It's slow going. But the end result is a really pretty ruffled hem, which would probably look better if I'd taken time to iron this fabric. Oh well. Now my dress is done. There are tons of guides online for how to twist the straps to create different looks. For Sophie here, I've twisted them to create cap sleeves and then knotted the straps around the waist. It's easy and versatile, and playing with different color combinations for the skirt and straps can give you really neat results. For especially tiny dolls, like Pookie Pookie or Little Fee, you can also use ribbons for the straps, which makes it even easier. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.